Hello, my name is Raj. I am a writer and doctor here in New York City.
My name is Thomas, and I'm a writer and actor here in New York City. And one of those is a more important job than the other.
Yeah. Anyway, we wanted to talk to you about our show, Dr. Patel.
Yes. It is a show written by a pair of immigrants about why immigration is a good thing.
And it's also very funny.
It's very
I
funny.
forgot to mention that.
It's very funny.
Anyway, so this is our pitch for the Comedy Lab.
Alright, so let us tell you about our show, Dr. Patel.
So it's a classic fish out of water story with a touch of medicine and prejudice. So in the 1970s, Dr. Jyotiraditya Patel, or as white people call him, Joe, a brilliant family physician from New Delhi, India, has accepted an offer to relocate to the US and practice medicine in their most underserved areas.
Yeah. He leaves his family behind, moves to the States, and is at random assigned to possibly the most rural backwoods village in Indiana that you can possibly imagine. Now, being the only brown-skinned resident in this town makes things difficult for him. It makes it difficult for him to integrate. However, he is the only doctor in a 100-mile radius, so he immediately becomes integral to these people and their lives.
Now, Dr. Patel is accepted by parts of the community, but then rejected by some others. Nevertheless, all parties need to overcome their prejudices in order to save lives. Easier said than done.
Yeah. So Joe is the only doctor serving 2,000 odd people in this town of Sturgeon, Indiana. There are literally no other doctors in easy driving distance, so he has his hands full. Between house calls and clinic visits, he will see all of these people at one time or another.
So let's talk about the characters in the show. First of all, we have Mary Jane Collins. She is the young receptionist at Dr. Patel's primary care clinic and becomes the doctor's de facto tour guide and translator. Then there's Pastor Jones, a local clergyman who's been dishing out spiritual healing in the absence of qualified physicians in his town.
Also in the town we have Hank Jr. Now he's the pharmacist in the town. He inherited the pharmacy he runs from his father, also called Hank, who recently died. He, however, is barely qualified to run the place, so he's always getting help from his mum, who is known as Mrs. Hank Sr. She's a semi-retired pharmacist's wife. She still assists at the pharmacy that she helped build, but is trying to remove herself from the work life to enjoy some kind of retirement. Now, they are quite nice people, but who is not a nice person is Mr. Farmer Joe, who is a middle-aged, angry, archetypal, gun-toting, Bible-thumping, don't-want-no-foreigners in his town type, and he is doing his best to get rid of Dr. Patel.
Then there's Mayor Elmo Collins, who is actually Mary Jane's father and the man who invited Dr. Patel to practice in Sturgeon. Then we have the lovely Mrs. Simmons, a retired librarian. She's the only one who's actually lived outside of Indiana. She is stubborn, opinionated, and constantly falling ill. But she's the kind of person that Dr. Patel needs to win over.
Yep. Other people in the town are Joe's next-door neighbor, Mr. Reuben Katz. He is a Jewish science teacher who sympathizes with the good doctor because they are both outsiders in the community, and the two of them connect over talking about the people around them who are suspicious of things who are new and different. They also, in the town, we have Mabel Burrows, who is Dr. Patel's African-American nurse. She actually lives in the next village over, which is an even further impoverished area, which is primarily African-American in demographic, which comes up in the show at some point, believe it or not.
So those are our characters.
Yeah, we love them.
So let's talk about the pilot. Now, in the pilot, Dr. Patel is waiting in the office of the US Federal Health Service, where he will be briefed about his new assignment. He's still jet-lagged from his flight and dealing with the culture shock of being in the United States. He is told that he is being assigned to the town of Sturgeon, Indiana. After a 4-hour drive, he reaches this charming but socially backward village, which has been without a doctor for 2 years.
Yeah. Now, although he is greeted warmly by Mayor Elmo Collins and his daughter Mary Jane, On his first day at work, he is met with confusion, resistance, abuse, and some threats of violence from the few people who appear at the clinic. And these patients include an old lady called Mrs. Simmons. She's an old lady, fixture of the community type, who is complaining of respiratory distress.
So he tries to treat her, but she refuses to listen to him. And at the end of a difficult day, he befriends his Jewish neighbor Reuben Katz, who gives him the lay of the land, explaining that people in this town are not good with new or different. That night, a fire is set in his home. He decides that this was a huge mistake and that he should return home to India as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm. In the morning, however, as he stirs on Kat's couch, he is called suddenly to Mrs. Simmons' house. She cannot stop coughing. It might be the end for her. The local pastor, Father Jones, is already gearing up for the last rites, but in the nick of time, Patel diagnoses that she is having a severe allergic reaction to the flowers in her front yard. He administers epinephrine, saves her, and orders that the flowers in her front lawn be removed. And she, naturally, is furious with him for getting rid of her beautiful flowers. But she is alive. So, whilst she is not thankful for his efforts, the community does, though, start to recognize his value. At least somewhat. And Patel ultimately decides to stay it out.
So I feel like Dr. Patel's story is the story of my father, or the story of my uncles, or in fact, to a certain extent, even my story. You know, we were all doctors who trained in India and then went to a foreign country and practiced there and called that place home. And I think, it is a remarkable journey of perseverance, of courage, and ultimately of acceptance and tolerance. And that's why I feel very strongly about this show.
So why this story and why now? I mean, the short answer is immigration's important. It's what built this nation. Like, it's integral, and it's just always in the conversation right now. And it feels like we're debating the word and not the people. We're not seeing how immigrants come in and change lives and improve lives. And it feels ridiculous to me that this amazing story that really happened in communities all across this country has not been talked about more. It's, to me, the sort of one of the greatest examples of how immigration has benefited the States in the last 50 years. And it's just right there, sitting there, waiting for us to talk about it. And it's a fish out of water story as well, which is, like, perfect for comedy. It's like, that's, it's comedy 101, pretty much. So that is our show. That is Dr. Patel. We really like it. We enjoyed telling you about it, and we hope that this is not the last time we talk about it to people.
We think it's a perfect show for the Comedy Lab, and I think it tells a wonderful story told by two wonderfully talented people.
Yeah, so talented. Like, these people are, like, honestly, it's talent like this which is why immigration is important. And if nothing else, this show could help us get our citizenship, which is, like, just really why we're doing this, honestly.
Let's please do this.
Yeah.
We want to stay here.
Please.
Thank you.
Please.